During celebrations to mark the centenary of RAF Martlesham Heath airfield in Suffolk, a special tribute was paid to a band of brave young American airmen who defied their country's neutrality laws to fight for Britain during her darkest hour. Nearly 2 years before the United States entered World War II, these young men crossed into Canada to volunteer their services as fighter pilots with the RAF.
Always known as Royal Air Force Martlesham Heath, but by no means were the people here limited to people from the RAF as we know it. In those very dark days of 1940, when this country faced a very real prospect of an invasion, famous names and famous squadrons operated from this airfield. And pilots in those early days came from all over the place. In particular, we should remember the United States pilots who came to join the Royal Air Force, although they stayed in their own squadrons. And they were volunteers before the United States declared entry into the Second World War. They were a very brave group of people, a varied list of people, civilians, who put on uniform to come and join in somebody else's war. But the big event was in 1943, when the United States Army Air Force, as it was then called, took over the whole base. And they stayed here until the very end of the war, flying a range of very, very fast and potent fighters, Thunderbolts, Mustangs, that sort of thing, flying heroic missions across Europe and leading to victory in that Second World War.
We are here to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of a community, also known as the cradle of British aviation. It is this community that opened its doors in April of 1941 to the men of RAF 71 Squadron and later to the 356 Fighter Group. Members of the community didn't know these individuals, and the squadron members had no idea of their new neighbors. But they came to develop a deep relationship and appreciation for each other that has left an indelible mark as witnessed in today's celebration. We don't know what motivated these brave young men from America to disobey the American isolationist policies of the day. Why did they give up their careers, their families, and in some cases their lives to fly and fight? Some say it was patriotism, maybe a taste for adventure, or perhaps the love of flying.
The Eagle Squadron that flew out of Martlesham Heath on 2 occasions, once for about 5 months and once for a little bit shorter during World War II. They were American volunteers to the RAF. They came at a time when the United States was not involved in the war. In fact, it was illegal for them to come. They faced criminal prosecution and loss of citizenship to do so, but they were determined to come. There were about 300 altogether, 84 of which joined the first Eagle Squadron, which was designated 71.
Actually, Peter did not tell the family. He kept it quiet because he knew the family would not appreciate his going to war. And so he left for Canada, and after he arrived there, he called us and let us know where he was at. And, well, you know, we had to accept it.
Well, I recall that we were really surprised and not too happy.
Did he say why he wanted to go off to the war?
He just loved to fly. And he thought it was an opportunity for his increase his flying time. And I don't think he realized at that time exactly what he was getting into. But then when he realized what he was doing, he was all for it.
People would call us and say, when we went to the movies, they had the newsreel back then, and they'd say, we saw Peter. And so Mom, Dad, and I would go to the movie, and we didn't care what the movie was about. We were just very anxious to see the newsreel. And a lot of times it would be like with the Red Cross, and they were having coffee and donuts or whatever, maybe tea. And we would just be so thrilled that we would get to see him, just, you know, that little glimpse. And it would just make our day.
So this is called Oscar, His Story, and it was written by his sister, 2 years his senior. And it was written after, actually all of the original notes for this book were taken shortly after the war when he was stationed at Edmonds Air Force Base, just north of Seattle, Washington. And this describes mostly his experience of being shot down in enemy territory, or being down in enemy territory, and then escaping through France and Spain with the help of the French resistance. This is a copy, I still have the original, of his original pilot's log, which details all of his missions, what he was flying, the day he flew, how many hours he was flying, and what happened that day, if he shot someone down, if he got injured or shot at or shot down, if his flying partner was shot down, and in one instance, his flying partner, Michael McFarlane, she's my half-sister's father, he was shot down and killed on D-Day. So that's detailed in here as well. I know that he was at D-Day. He was in the air at D-Day. The worst day of his life, he said.
Did he tell you anything more about it?
He really couldn't talk about it. He talked to his sister Mildred, who was the one who wrote the book, Oscar. And she told me after he died, she lived to 97 and he lived to 87. So I had a few years with her after he was gone. And she said that she'd never seen him cry except to talk about that day. And he wouldn't talk about it.
My father was Michael McFarlane. He was an Eagle Squadron pilot from the U.S. I know he was killed on D-Day. I was born 5 days later. My uncle once told me that he wasn't shot down, that it was engine trouble, and he just went down over the English Channel because of the engine trouble. I don't know if that's valid or not. Initially, he wanted to join the United States Air Force and the Army Air Force at that time, and they said he was too short. And so he went to Canada, and they took him. There was an agreement made between it was Canada and Britain, or just Canada and the U.S., that the men joining up from the U.S. did not have to take the oath of allegiance. His enlistment preceded that, and that created great problems for me later on, because when he was killed, my mother connected with his friend and other Eagle Squadron pilot, Oscar Cohen, and eventually they met up and married. And I lived in the United States growing up, and I had to declare citizenship at the age of 18, and I went to declare for the U.S., and they said, sorry, can't do it. Your father wasn't a citizen. And I said, what? He died for his country. How can he not be a citizen? And as it turned out, it was because he'd taken the oath of allegiance. He had gone back to them when they transferred the Eagle Squadron to the U.S. forces and said, I want to repatriate. And they said, oh, no, you don't need to. And that was their mistake. So I eventually, through my uncle, contacted Senator Philip Hart of Michigan, asked to have a private bill put through Congress to reinstate my father's citizenship. And when they did so, it took 4 years, but it got done. I became a natural-born citizen by virtue of my father having his citizenship reinstated.
Known to have our American friends, all descendants of those brave men who came over to help us in our great hour of need, when things could not have been darker here in the West.